Welcome back with a smiley face. A link of previous episodes is provided into the description of the video. You can also join us on Patreon to listen more unlimited audiobooks like this. You can also visit and shop our ebooks. His Revenge to Restitution. Episode 8. Chapter 52 to 59. Liam. How dare she? What possessed her? How did she even disguise it for so long? I saw nothing but red when the door finally budged. I could not possibly fathom what she was hoping for with this little stunt. Gavin was angry too, but not quite as much as me. He was quiet for the moment as I paced my office floor. I was rough, probably too rough, toward her. I couldn't help it, though. She pushed me past any tolerable limit this time. The look of defeat mixed with fear on her face when she admitted that all Warwick wanted was her made me think she finally realized you couldn't settle everything peacefully. Sometimes, there is no compromise, and we can't treat every dispute as if there is one. Little maid is upset, Gavin pointed out. I didn't care at that moment. She needed to think about what she had done. There were so many ways that could have ended with her getting hurt. My rage bubbled up once more as I thought about the various ways Warwick could have used this witch to get to Azalea. I lashed out, sending my lamp across the room. It exploded with a crash on the bookshelf. The door opened behind me, but I didn't bother to turn around. I could smell Damien immediately. He stepped inside but remained otherwise silent. I tried to rein my temper back in. Breaking furniture would not help the situation. I needed to get to Warwick, and I needed to do it soon before he could create any more frisson in my pack. I was running out of friends and family he could attack. Are you going to keep her locked up then? Damien asked blandly. He knew I was angry, and he probably already knew why. She is staying put. I can't trust her, I told him. You're stupid, he sighed. I whipped around, glaring at him. You want to reword that? No, I don't, he said. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest. Be mad that she went behind your back, but also don't be stupid enough to know why. She isn't like us. We were bred to fight, Liam. Fight first, think second. Act. It was ingrained in us. Not Azalea. Do not defend her actions right now, Damien, I warned him. She is perpetually drawn to situations where she can get herself hurt. And she is perpetually adverse to people suffering, he said, pushing himself away from the wall. He raised an eyebrow. You could not possibly understand why that is. He left my office and me with even more frustration. We can't leave little maid to cry, Gavin insisted. She shouldn't have lied to me, I shot back. She was helping, he said. She was. She lied and did this behind my back. She knew it was wrong, I argued. Warwick could have gotten to her thanks to her blind trust. It was not blind, he said. Her bodyguard, who has been trusted to her for 7 years, trusted the witch and brought her here. That is not blind. Do not try and excuse this. I could not believe he was on her side about this. He was just as panicked as I was locked outside that room. You forget, the moon goddess made her that way, he said. He was oddly calm, and I was not in the mood for it. I don't care what the moon goddess did. She isn't here to keep Azalea alive, I argued. She left that job to me, except my mate wants to make it an impossible one to do. You should not speak about the goddess that way. Azalea is simply a product of what has happened to her, Gavin said. I hated when he tried to act all reasonably. He was usually X driven, mindless brute ready for a fight. She has to learn where the line is and stop willingly walking into danger. Gavin was only riling me up more now. Little mate is the bravest wolf in this pack, he stated. She does not pick a fight she cannot win. She will always look for a way to protect us. I don't need protecting. She does. How did Gavin and Azalea not see this? I was going to destroy this stupid vampire, I just needed the right opportunity. As you worry for her safety, she worries for yours. She has to protect you in her way, and she does that by finding a way to end the fighting, he pushed. He seemed to be getting angry with me now for our disagreement. Little mate will always be empathetic to a fault and will never accept fighting first. Pretty insightful for X-driven fleabag, I insulted him. Better to know and watch our mate than try to control her blindly, he argued. You really have nothing to complain about. It is not the worst thing to have a Luna that would give up her life for the safety of her people. I pushed him away, completely done with his onslaught. I pounded my fist into the desk again. That whole day had changed in moments, and now everyone had an opinion on how I treated Azalea. None of them would ever understand the constant anxiety, the fear that literally anything could separate us. This was precisely why alphas with human mates rejected them or lived a life of stigma. You cannot focus on being an effective leader when you are always chasing away threats to your mate. An ache started to invade my skull. The adrenaline coursing through me from all the rage, arguing with Damien and Gavin, and Azalea's emotions were creating an unpleasant cocktail inside of me. A knock on my door caught my attention. I turned around, ready to shout at whoever was interrupting me to find Missy in my doorway. Her face was distressed, and I knew something was wrong. All my frustration was Azalea, and her stunt vanished in an instant. My pup needed help. Dad, she said softly. Missy. I barely made it through school. When I got home, I couldn't sit still. My legs kept moving, pacing all over the house. Holland and I were certain that something was wrong. Something didn't go their way. Surely, I would have felt it if Maddox were gravely injured. Wolves can sense when their mates are badly hurt. Julie watched me with worry. Missy, you don't know that something is wrong. What if this is just you missing him? I shook my head. No, I know it, Julie. Something went wrong, and Maddox is in trouble, I told her. My throat was scratchy, and my voice kept catching in it. I had no idea what to do. Look, your father is the alpha. If something were wrong, he would know. He would be the first to know. Go talk to him, she reasoned. Surely, he would tell you if something happened to your mate. What if he didn't? What if he was waiting? I asked worriedly. She came over to stop me from pacing. She planted her hands on my shoulder and held my gaze. Missy, go talk to your dad, she ordered. It's the only thing you can do right now. I took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, I told her. I'll be here, she said with a sad smile. I left the house and ran right to the pack house. If he didn't know what was happening, maybe he would contact them. If I could just hear that Maddox was okay, I think I could calm down. When I got inside, the pack house had an odd atmosphere, not helping my fear any. I raced up the stairs. Lee's office was hanging wide open, and she wasn't inside, but I needed Liam right now. I went right to his office door that sat ajar. I stopped in the doorway, hearing growling and something slam. He sounded angry, and my heart felt like there was an icy hand squeezing it. He couldn't be mad that they were caught, I wouldn't accept it. After a minute, there was no more growing, but Liam stood pinching the bridge of his nose. I knocked on the door and pushed it open timidly. Liam turned around. At first, his face was full of rage, and his mouth opened like he was about to shout. Then he stopped, his expression changing. "Dad!" I croaked out. "Missy, what's wrong?" he asked breathlessly. "Something happened," I said. His eyebrows knitted together. "I think something happened," I clarified. "What do you mean?" he asked, coming toward me. "With Maddox and Alpha Langston." "I don't know," I stopped trying to find the words. "I have had this feeling all day. Holland too. Something is wrong. Maddox isn't okay, and I don't know what to do." "Okay, okay," Liam said, setting his warm hands on my shoulders comfortingly. "Take a breath. Tell me everything." He listened earnestly while I explained the sinking feeling that I had had all day. He nodded his head when I finished. "Okay," he said. "Nothing has been brought to me. We haven't heard from them since they last checked in, but that doesn't mean anything is wrong. If things went right, we should see them tomorrow or the next day." I nodded my head, but Holland wasn't accepting his words. "Can we contact them? I need to hear his voice. I have to know I am wrong." Liam looked torn. I looked at him with pleading eyes, hoping he could understand how much I needed to know Maddox was okay. This far surpassed any of the loneliness and longing that I had felt so far. "All right," he said. He turned around and went to his desk. Pulling his phone toward him, he dialed the number quickly. He had a worried look on his face as it rang and rang. When no one picked up, he turned to me. "Let's give it a few minutes and try one more time. We don't know where they are or what they are doing." My lip quivered, but I nodded my head. I wanted desperately to walk in here, and he tell me everything was fine, not this. Liam watched the clock while I watched him. I tried to focus on just breathing evenly and not what could be happening with Maddox. Exactly 10 minutes later, he picked up the phone and dialed again. With every ring, the icy fist around my heart tightened its grip. Liam looked up at me with uneasiness as he hung up the phone. "Missy, we can't jump to conclusions," he started as he walked towards me. I stumbled back. "No. Don't touch me!" I shouted. This was confirmation. Something happened to Maddox and Langston. Something was wrong, and my mate could be hurt. Liam stopped walking toward me. "You did this!" I screamed at him as tears fell. "This is all your fault. We were happy. I'm not even your daughter. You had to make it so that stupid vampire could take him away. You couldn't leave us out of it." I was out of my mind. Resentment bubbled up inside, exploding out of my mouth. "You said you wanted us nowhere near this, and now look, you took my mate away. You ripped him away from me." Every word was a knife in Liam's chest. I could see how they cut, but I didn't care. He was good for me. We were good for each other. He made me feel whole. Now I may never see him again. You took him from me. I didn't recognize the girl yelling at her adopted father. She was hurt, lonely, and scared like I had never been before. Two people pushed into the room behind me. "What's going on?" I heard Austin say. "Missy, please calm down," Lily said next to me. "He took Maddox away," I said, falling to my knees. I dropped my face into my hands, and powerful sobs racked my whole body. This wasn't fair, none of this was fair. There was whispered conversation around me, but I didn't care. I let myself fall deeper into my endless pit of despair. We didn't have any time, we just got each other. I knew it would come, the pain. I knew at any time I would feel Maddox's death, and it would kill me. I wouldn't be able to live with the pain just like my mother. Small strong hands pulled me up. "Come on," Lily said softly next to my ear. She supported me as she guided me out of Liam's office. It didn't matter where she took me because Maddox wouldn't be there. Chapter 53. Liam, what is going on? Austin asked. He took Maddox away. Missy yelled as she sunk to her knees. Lily was immediately over the top of her, trying to calm her down. Something may have happened with Maddox and Langston. I cannot reach them, and she says that her wolf has been off all day, I explained quietly. You tried calling them? He asked in a hushed voice. Yes, twice, I said. They aren't supposed to check in again until tomorrow, and we expect them to be headed home, Austin said. I nodded. I watched as Lily got Missy to her feet and led her out of my office. I sighed. I can't say I am not worried, though, I told Austin. Austin looked contrite. What can we do? He asked. He didn't like seeing Missy that upset either, but he wasn't the one she was blaming. Let's call all of the allied packs between us and the coordinates they were headed to, I instructed. Let's see if they have tried to find refuge anywhere before we really panic. And if we get nothing, he inquired. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I said. Austin went to get Damien, Jacob, and Gentry to help him make calls. I found Beta Meadows' number and called her. Yes, she answered shortly. Generally, we waited for her to contact us and not by phone. She was keeping her association with us away from the prying ears of her alpha. I need your help, and I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't critical, I told her. How exactly? She asked. She was keeping her words short, probably to prevent anyone from hearing her intentions. I need a trace on our search party. My daughter's mate is one of the pair, and she believes something is wrong. We cannot contact them, I told her. Can you do it? That is within my capability, she answered. We just need to know if they are alive or not, I said. I know you are unmated, but I have to make sure that boy comes home. Understood. I will see what I can do, she agreed before hanging up. I moved over to the couch and slumped down, leaning my elbows on my knees. Today was turning out to be a train wreck from top to bottom. 30 minutes later, I got an email. Meadow came through. I shot up and gravitated to my desk, turning on my computer. Getting the email pulled up, I opened the attachment. I scanned the screen only to have my shoulders fall in disappointment. The last no location for either phone was about a mile from the coordinates, and it was very early this morning. Neither phone had connected to a tower since they were headed to Warwick's Hold. Now I had reason to be worried. They should have been headed away from there by now. We should have some trace on them unless something happened to them or the phones. Damien knocked on the door frame, garnering my attention. Anything? I asked. He shook his head as he stepped into the room. His posture was rigid, he had to be frustrated with me still. Austin and Jacob are still calling, but the ones Gentry and I contacted haven't seen them. I collapsed into my desk chair. This isn't good, I whispered. I know she is hurting right now and scared, but you and I both know we can't jump to conclusions just yet, Damien said. I shouldn't have sent the kid, I said. You didn't make a mistake in sending him. Maddox is a strong kid with a good head on his shoulders. With Langston by his side, they will be fine, he said. It doesn't matter, I said. Missy is right. I put her mate in danger. I'm no better than my grandfather. Give it time. They may be trying to get to a safe place. The phones could have been ditched. We don't know anything yet, he said. 24 hours. That's all I can do. If we don't have any word in 24 hours, we're sending a search party, I told him. Damien shook his head. We'll discuss that tomorrow, he said, sounding disappointed. Lily is taking Missy home. She already called Sol and told her to bring all Missy's friends over. Your mom is bringing all the kids to me. You need to go sort your out with your maid before she can't forgive your behavior. I'll handle my maid how I see fit, I growled, irritated with his implications. I might have my own going on, but I have told you before I will not with Azalea. You had your one pass, and I am telling you what you did was out of line. Go fix it and stop arguing with me, he threatened. I clenched my jaw at his reminder. I was vividly aware of every mistake I had ever made with Azalea and did not need his guilt trip. Azalea was out of line, and that was between us. Damien, don't overstep your bounds, I said in a low voice. Liam, he said before storming from my office. I let out a heavy breath. Before I could even think about dealing with Azalea, I needed to call Emma and let her know what was happening. Azalea. It's been hours since Liam locked me in our room. After a while, I crawled off our bed and moved to the couch, wrapping myself in a blanket. I cried for a while, upset with myself for being so foolish. I knew this could all end up at a dead end, that Liam would be furious and lash out because of it, but I charged ahead anyway. I can't trust you now. I broke that. I pushed it so far that I broke the trust he had for me. I felt like, in some way, I had damaged our bond, and I had no idea how I could fix it. Warwick wanted to destroy Liam in the most basic way, he wanted to hit him where he was most vulnerable. Liam was right, too. Even if I gave myself to Warwick and he promised to leave Liam alone, it wouldn't end there. Warwick didn't have honor behind his words. He lied and manipulated Vlad for 2 years. I shouldn't have ever thought that he would honor a compromise I made with him. I felt pity for Warwick. He lost his destined, and it turned him into this. He was consumed by rage and hatred after losing the love of his long life. In my heart, I knew Liam would be the same. If he lost me, something in him would break. He would be worse than his father or grandfather ever were. If I were to die, the man I loved would die as well. I had no idea what time it was as I sat in the darkroom. I never even tried opening the door, but I was sure Liam sent someone to sit outside it. When the door slowly swung open, light flooded in from the hall, casting Liam in a silhouette. He turned the lights on dimly and closed the door behind him. I sat up on the couch watching him. He paid me no attention as he went for the closet. He disappeared for a moment, only to reappear with some pajamas on. He headed straight over to the bed, not bothering to glance my way. Liam, I whispered. His steps stilled, and I could see the muscles of his shoulders flex. Liam, I'm sorry, I started. His hand came up to silence me. I held my breath, waiting for him to say anything. You went too far, Azalea. I know. I am so sorry. I thought I could find a better way, I tried. Liam shook his head, still facing away from me. I refuse to live in a world that you don't exist in. I don't know how to make that any clearer to you. I know you can't help it, I know the moon goddess made you this way, but I am done with you trying to get yourself killed. My stomach churned at his words. I'm not trying to get myself killed, I said in a broken voice. Liam whirled around so fast it made me flinch. Tell me you wouldn't have done it. Tell me you wouldn't have handed yourself over to end this war. My lip quivered. Liam's eyes were practically bulging from his head, and a vein was popping from his neck. I couldn't tell him that because if it truly would have ended things, I would have done it for him and my pack. You can't. You can't because you would walk right into death's door without a single look back. You would sacrifice without so much as a thought as to what would be left behind, as to what you would destroy by doing so. He was breathing hard again, and I felt a whole new wave of tears sting my eyes. Liam, I'm scared, I shakily admitted. He didn't say anything, only watched me with his pained eyes, so I continued. I'm afraid you are going to leave to fight Warwick, and I will never see you again. That he will get what he wants then come to finish us off. I'm afraid that this won't end with us, that we are going to pass this on to our children. I can't bear the thought of our kids finding their mates only to lose them to a conflict they had no part in. I paused as my voice continued to tremble. Liam, you are strong. If something happened to me, you would be okay. I'm not like you, I couldn't physically recover if you died. If giving up my one life meant that I could save yours, our children's, and all of those in our pack and the others that have pledged to help us, then I would make that sacrifice. I don't want to die, I want to see our babies grow and find their mates. I want to watch Junior become alpha and meet all of the grandpups they bring us. But I would do it to guarantee your future. Liam stood straighter and looked at the floor. You can't see the whole picture here. None of those things would happen if we lost you. His fists clenched and relaxed at his side. You're wrong. I am not strong, Azalea. I have only ever been strong for you and because of you. When I rejected you, I made myself better because of you. I wasn't worthy of you back then. Since I found you, I have only ever been strong to keep you safe. Without you, I am a weak wolf, and I can admit it. His eyes finally came up and connected to mine. The expression on his face filled my chest with pressure, making it unbearable to breathe. I can't play this game anymore, Azalea. I'm tired, I can't keep trying to convince you to stay away from danger. I never wanted things to come to this, but I just don't have the energy to fight with you anymore. He turned around and ran his hands over his face. I stood from the couch, letting the blanket fall from my shoulders. I closed the distance between us, my heart thundering in my chest. I moved so quickly that I slammed into him, my arms hugging around his center like I would lose him forever. I hid my face in his back. I won't do it anymore, I promised into his back. My nose was too stuffed to smell his forest scent, but his presence helped. I won't be so frivolous. Just don't, my hand fisted on his shirt as I gripped him tighter. His hands lifted to rest on my arms. I'm tired, Azalea, he whispered as he turned in my arms. I looked up at him, trying to blink away the tears stuck in my lashes. I shook my head. I promise I won't do it anymore, Liam. Do you trust me to end this and come back alive? He asked, bringing a hand to cup my cheek. I nodded. I trusted him more than anyone else. Despite my fear, I knew he would do everything in his power to come back. Liam pulled me close and surrounded me. His lips came to the top of my head. I'm sorry, my alpha. I'm so sorry. Chapter 54. Maddox. The sire must have been sure that he wouldn't need help because I didn't come across any resistance on the way to the car. I was prepared to deal with them, but given the shape that Langston was in, I was glad I didn't have to put him down to fight anyone. He was dripping blood from several wounds that weren't healing as they should, and his back wasn't mending. I'd heard of this happening before. I was pretty sure that he'd been hurt so badly, his body couldn't keep up, and it was shutting down. So, at the brink of death, Langston wasn't healing like a wolf. As I reached our vehicle, my mind was spinning. Where could I take him that could actually help given his condition and what we are? Dr. Ron. I shifted Langston's weight so I could reach down to grab my phone, and that's when I realized. I didn't have a pocket, my phone had been discarded in the woods where I shifted. It would be hours to get to Dr. Ron, but I didn't remember any of the packs along the way having a genuinely competent doctor. I didn't have a choice. The best middle ground I could think of was to get him to Luna's Inn and stabilize him there in order to call our pack doctor. Looking down, I could tell Langston was going into shock. He was shivering in my arms, and he was still struggling to breathe. I could see a blue tinge starting to form in his lips, and that spurred me to go faster. He was going to die if I was indecisive. I ripped the car door open, almost tearing it from the hinges before I realized I needed to calm down. Langston moaned at me, shifting his weight again, and as gently as I could, I slid him into the back seat. I tried to keep his spine as straight as possible, but with his height, it was difficult. He was too big to lay flat across, though, and there was only so much I could do. I bent his legs at the knees and grabbed towels from the trunk to roll at his sides to keep him as straight as possible. I'm not a doctor, it was the best I could do. His breathing was still labored, but he looked to be in less pain. Grabbing a blanket from our things, I threw it over him to try to keep him warm to stave off the effects of shock and the blood loss causing it. Without getting anything else, I threw myself in the front seat and peeled out towards home. I had an entire day's journey ahead of me, and I planned to drive through the night. I didn't know if I should let Langston sleep or not. I was scared that if I let him close his eyes, he'd never open them again. Still, with the severity of his injuries, I just had to hope that his wolf could at least keep him alive, even if he couldn't be healed all the way. Hours had gone by, and I strained my ears for the sounds of Langston's breath. I'd resigned myself to letting him slip into unconsciousness because there was no way I was going to be able to yell and keep him awake with how long the journey back was. I'd stopped for gas earlier, and that's when I realized that in my adrenaline dump after the fight, I'd entirely forgotten that I'd shifted back and forth. I'd been driving with no clothes on. The human getting gas next to me looked up as I opened the door and got out of the driver's seat, and his eyes got wide as dinner plates as he quickly turned and ripped the nozzle off out of his car before almost throwing it back at the pump to jump back in his car and tear out of the gas station. I looked down and realized I was not only nude but covered from head to toe in blood. It must have looked like something from a horror movie. I shrugged and opened the trunk to rummage around for clothes from my bag and pulled them on quickly while the gas was pumping, looking around to see if anyone else had caught what happened. Luckily, it was the middle of the night, and no one else was around. I grabbed a shirt out of my bag and drenched it with a water bottle to wipe the blood from my face and arms so the cashier wouldn't call the police when I walked in. Luckily, we had emergency cash, so I grabbed some and threw it on the counter before heading back to the car. Looking through the back window before climbing in the car, I didn't know if Langston was going to make it through this. Axel. My stomach was growling, and I could smell food from the kitchen. Lemon was starting to chew on the end of her pen and sway in place as she worked on something the way she always does when she's getting hungry, but she's too focused elsewhere to notice. I smiled. The smallest things about this woman were my favorite to watch, the things no one else will ever get to enjoy witnessing. Lunch had started a while ago, and I wondered if I would have to distract her from work to get her to eat with me. I stood up to do just that, breathing in her scent and the comfort of her presence when I heard it. The sound of a car horn incessantly honking over and over. Beep. 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 It was faint at first, but it kept repeating as it got louder. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt stupid for not realizing it. It was an SOS call. I looked at Lemon, who was already moving towards the door but stopped, looking back at me with a puzzled expression. "Stay here," I pleaded, gently pushing her to the side and peeking out the window next to the door. A black vehicle of some sort was barreling down the road towards the inn, blaring its horn as it came. I tore the door open, worried that this might be a ploy to attack the inn with us, thinking that it was someone in distress. As I neared the edge of the porch, I contemplated the consequences of shifting with humans inside in broad daylight. Even if Liam understood, it would cause problems. If it were vampires, though, I'd have no choice. I wouldn't let them hurt Lemon. To my surprise, the car came to a hard stop on the lawn of the inn, ending in a continuous tone from the car horn. Beep 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 beep. I ran over to the car. Whether it was a ruse or not, it looked like someone needed help. I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I got to the driver's side. It was Maddox. He'd collapsed over the steering wheel, and he looked a mess. He was covered in blood, dirt, and grime with mostly clean clothes pulled on over it, and it looked like he'd hastily wiped his face with something. It hadn't done much to remove the blood he was covered in. The smell was awful. Vampire. Lemon had reached my side and looked down in horror as she realized who it was. "Maddox!" she cried, leaning down to try to see if he was still breathing. "I need Missy. She needs to get here. We need a doctor." She was starting to become hysterical, and it wasn't like her. She was usually calm and collected running things here, but this was violent, and it was her friend's mate. Before I tried calming her, I noticed what was in the back seat. I couldn't let her see that just yet. Grabbing Lemon by the shoulders, I stood her up and dropped to her eye level to talk to her. "Lemon, I know you're scared right now, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes as she tried to calm down. "Good," I said, breathing a small sigh of relief. "I know you want to tell Missy, but I need you not to do that right now. First, I need you to call Azalea. Tell her to get Liam and tell her Maddox and the Alpha with him are hurt." Her eyes darted around me, trying to get a look at what she'd missed. "No," I told her. "Eyes on me. Tell them to bring Dr. Ron and any serious medical supplies he possesses. Have them bring Missy with them. Last, I need you to bring me as much clean linen as you can, along with every ounce of medical supplies or kits you have. Can you do that?" She nodded vigorously, wiping the corners of her eyes and replacing her look of terror with one of determination to get the job done. "There's my girl." "Bring it where?" she asked. "Azalea's apartment. I'm going to try to patch them up the best I can away from the human guests until Dr. Ron gets here. Tell them to hurry. I don't know if the Alpha is okay." With that, I pulled Maddox from the driver's seat, walked him over to the passenger seat, and placed him there gently. As I leaned into the door with him in my arms, I realized that he was snoring lightly. Thank the goddess, he'd just passed out. As I stood, I saw Lemon disappearing through the door of the inn, her phone all ready to her ear and talking animatedly. "Goddess, couldn't you just give us the bond?" I jumped into the driver's seat and carefully pulled off of the lawn, trying to be as quiet as possible after the explosion of noise Maddox had caused on his way in. I quickly drove around to Luna's apartment and forced the door open. "Maddox." I'd woken up in a chair and forgotten where I was for a moment. I broke it on accident when I immediately jumped up, thinking I'd been captured. Axel grabbed me and assured me I was fine, that I was safe at the inn. I'd done my job and gotten Langston here. Dr. Ron was on the way. Langston was much cleaner now, as was I. He'd been laid on the bed, and it looked like Axel had done a makeshift job of stabilizing his spine with blankets rolled at his sides and head, similar to what I'd done with towels. Langston still wasn't awake, but the color in his face looked a little better. There was nothing more I could do to help Langston now. Axel suggested I give him and Lemon some space until help arrived. Tom was a tornado in my mind. We were so close to our mate, but I needed to make sure Langston would be okay. I couldn't just leave after what we had gone through. I knew Alpha would come with the pack doctor, but I wasn't sure if Missy would be with them. I paced outside the little cottage behind the inn, willing them to get here so I could get to my mate. If they came by car, it would be around an hour. If they came in wolf form, it could be less. Every molecule in my body wanted to shift and take off to the pack. We made it out of there alive. I had just slaughtered a sire, and now I needed my girl. Maddox. I heard her voice in my head. I stopped, alert now. Maddox, she chanted again. Missy. I said back. She was close, I knew it. There was movement along the treeline on the far side of the property. I held my breath waiting. Was that her? I had no idea how long it had been since they called the pack for help. My body gave up as soon as I stopped the car in front of the inn. The movement increased until the trees parted way. First, one wolf jumped out, bounding impossibly fast towards me. Two more were right on its tail. I would recognize that pale silver coat anywhere. Missy was making a straight line for me. A smile stretched across my face as Tom howled happily in my head. She leapt through the air, shifting as she did. I ran forward with my arms open, catching her before she could hit the ground. She wrapped around me like a vice, legs around my waist and arms around my neck. I closed my arms around her, squeezing her so tightly there was no space between our bodies. Maddox, she sobbed. I'm back, I told her. Don't cry. I'm here. Maddox, she continued to sob into my neck. She was a storm of emotions, the predominant one being relief. I paid no mind to the movement around us, I just held her close. All that mattered was being back with her. I accomplished what I was sent to do and got back to Missy as I promised. I thought you were hurt. I could feel something was wrong. Missy was almost inconsolable in my arms. I'm sorry. We ran into a little snag. But I am here. I'm okay. You don't need to cry, I told her. I basked in her strawberry scent, I ached for it all this time. Someone cleared their throat behind us. Missy kept her head firmly buried in my neck. I turned, clutching her to me. Lemon was standing there with a blanket in her arms. She reached forward and draped it over Missy with a wink before she turned and headed toward the inn. I let out a small laugh. Is it safe to guess that you didn't take a moment to grab your clothes? I asked her. She squirmed over me. No, she said into my skin. I turned and kissed the side of her head with a smile. Maybe we should find you something, I suggested. Is there anything here? Can we just go home? She asked, finally pulling herself away enough to look me in the eyes. Her cheeks glistened from her tears, but her eyes were clear and happy. Whatever you want. I won't be leaving your side for a very long time, I assured her. Should we say something to your dad? She let out a little laugh. I don't care much about him right now, she said with an adorable smile. I couldn't wait any longer. I crashed my lips to hers, basking in the sparks of our bond. Tom was over the moon. Missy kissed me back with just as much enthusiasm. My legs moved, taking us to the trees and back home. Chapter 55. Liam. Maddox seemed to be just fine, and I knew that he and Missy would need some time together before I could discuss what happened with him. Axel briefed me on what happened once Langston and Maddox arrived at the inn. Looking over at Langston as my uncle went about waking him and checking him over, I was worried. His injuries sounded severe, and our expedited healing capabilities couldn't fix everything. Some injuries were just too extreme. About 30 minutes later, my uncle came over to me. "He's as comfortable as we can get him here," he said. "I will be back with supplies to move him." "How's it look?" I asked. He shook his head. "I need to get some images to be sure, but I am not confident he will regain function of his legs," he said quietly. I nodded my head. I never wanted this to happen. My uncle left the cottage, giving me privacy with Langston. "Don't start with the blame game," Langston said from the bed. I moved over to him, taking a seat next to him. "I'm really sorry this happened," I told him. "You shouldn't be. I may be hurt, but Maddox and I are both alive. If it wasn't for that boy, I wouldn't be here," he said. I bit my tongue for a moment, debating the thought in my head. "Langston, I could call Azalea." I started. He let out a weak chuckle. "No, that isn't necessary," he said. "I appreciate the sentiment, and I know your mate would drop everything and come running. I think this is just the moon goddess telling me I am past my prime, that it is time to pick a successor. You could just let her try," I reasoned. "Emma will be so upset when she sees you." "Emma and I will be just fine," he said. "We've had a lot of years together, and thanks to Maddox, we will still have more. I might just be a little slower now." "So you found it then?" I asked. "Yes, we did," he answered. There was a grimace on his face. "Was this Warwick's doing or one of his clan?" I asked. "Neither," he said, surprising me. "We were found by another sire. Big Rave, I think it was. Another clan is working with Warwick." I clarified. I can only assume there were more than one by the way Big Rave spoke. Although the location we were at held very little evidence of other vampires, he explained. Maddox was able to confirm that Warwick was there, though. "So, now we have multiple sires to deal with. This is quickly beginning to mirror the First War," I grumbled, dropping my head into my hands. We now had multiple clans to deal with, and my most loyal and trusted ally on our side was disabled. There was no way he could fight in his condition. "One less now," Langston said. I looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" I questioned. "Maddox killed Big Rave. Brutally, if I am being honest," he said. "I didn't think we could kill him ourselves. The boy is strong, but I guess I underestimated his ability and skill. I tried to make an opening for him to leave, to get back here and report what we found and get back to his mate. He didn't listen." I asked. "He did at first," Langston said. "By my estimation, he was probably able to get back to the car. Shortly after Big Rave shattered my spine, he returned. He fought Big Rave himself after I was barely able to leave a scratch." I let out a low whistle. "That is astounding, I must say." "I agree. Although I was slipping in and out of consciousness, he was able to get me out of there and made it all the way here. I am not sure he stopped for anything but fuel until getting here," Langston explained. I couldn't say that I was anything but impressed with Maddox's determination and quick thinking. The fact that he could kill a sire by himself was astonishing on its own. "I just hope the boy can cope with all that has happened," Langston interrupted my thoughts. "I'll keep an eye on him," I promised. I placed my hand over Langston's lying on the bed. I can never thank you enough for all your help. Truly. I always knew you would be a great alpha, Liam. Your father was a strong man, even if he had some character flaws. I know you will take care of the boy and make sure this war ends once and for all. Azalea. Lily and I sat in the dining room, putting together the centerpieces for Lacey's baby shower. Felix was busy carrying in all the pumpkins we had painted earlier this morning. We were still waiting for Liam to come back with news about Maddox and Langston. When he was running from the pack house, I texted Missy and called the school to let them know she was leaving. So, yesterday was a little intense, Lily said cautiously. Yeah, I sighed. What exactly set him off? She asked. I knew she was just worried about me, but Liam and I weren't exactly okay. I slept in his arms all night, but when we woke up this morning, there was a weird tension between us. He left the room as soon as Isley woke up, and I had barely seen him since. I went behind his back, I told her. Lily rolled her eyes. That is to be expected. You're a 28-year-old woman with a mild control freak of a mate. You are literally never alone, and Liam can be a tad pig-headish, she reasoned. I chuckled a bit. He means well. He just gets stuck in his head too much, and all of this has him so wound up, I lamented. Lily gave me a sympathetic look. I still should not have done it. Done what? She asked. I lowered my voice. I got a witch to help me contact Warwick, I admitted. Lily gasped, and my eyes widened. SHHHH, I hissed. Lee, what were you thinking? She asked in a hushed voice. I shook my head, looking away from her scrutinizing gaze. It was dumb. I just wanted to find a way where we could avoid the fighting. We have already lost too much. Oh, Lee, Lily said, grabbing my hands. You always have the best heart out of all of us. It's no excuse. Liam was right to be angry. It could have been a trap, and now there is a rift between my mate and me. Whether that was Warwick's end or not, it happened, I said. There won't be for long, she assured me. I don't know, Lily. He's never been so angry, I told her. Felix brought the last armful of pumpkins into the dining room, avoiding both of our gazes. I still needed to apologize to him as well. Lily grabbed some tiny pumpkins and brought them to our table to fit into the favors. So, how's everything going with Damien? I noticed he's getting back into beta duties, I said, changing the subject. Yeah, she chirped, avoiding eye contact. Is that all that he is doing? I asked. Lily's shoulders slumped. He is training like crazy and seems to be getting some of his strength back. He is holed up in his office or off with Austin or Jacob when he isn't training. In the evenings, he spends time with the kids and then goes out to let Cage out before coming to bed. It just doesn't seem like he has space for me right now. I'm sure that isn't true. I told her. Why don't you shift with him? I am sure Cage would love that. She shrugged, looking despondent. He hasn't said anything about it. I don't think he wants me with him. Lily, Damien loves you so much. You two are the best mate pair I know. This is just a rough patch, I tried to console her. Maybe, she sighed. She grabbed her finished centerpieces and stood to put them in the bins we had to hold everything. She looked down at the table and frowned. I think there is some more blue ribbon downstairs. I'll be right back, she excused herself. I frowned at her back as she hurried away. I went back to the task at hand, hoping that my best friend would be okay. I wasn't in the best position to be giving relationship advice, but I didn't think she should doubt Damien. Felix came over and took Lily's seat. I looked up at him, confused. "Hi," I said. He nodded. His face was passive, but his body language seemed like he wanted to say something. "Felix, I should apologize," I said before he could say anything. His eyebrow raised in curiosity. "I deceived you. I didn't tell you the whole truth about why I wanted to speak with a witch. I put you in an awful position with both Liam and Willow, and you did not deserve that. You have been nothing but wonderful to me for years, so I am sorry. I consider you my friend and my family after all this time, so it was wrong of me to take advantage of you." Felix was quiet for a moment, absorbing my words. He nodded, then spoke, "Thank you for that, Luna. I think we can agree to leave it in the past." I smiled and nodded. "I would like that. Having one person not angry with me is a relief," I joked. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a piece of fabric. He set it on the table and unwrapped it. It was a small knife in a sheath. "What is this, Felix?" I asked. "It is a knife, Luna. Neither of us is ignorant about why you have always had some sort of protection around you. Personally, I think it wouldn't be very characteristic of you to learn to fight in any manner at this point. But we both know this war is at its tipping point. Any day now, we'll break loose. Both Azran and I would lay down our lives for you, but there is always the chance that someone could get to you despite any good intentions. Luna, I have never asked anything of you as it is not my place to do so. I would be failing in my job to protect you if I did not do this. I would appreciate it if you could wear that watch and carry this with you for now," he explained. This was the most verbose Felix had ever been with me. I knew there was much more under the surly surface of the man, but his honesty had stirred me. "I don't think I could." I trailed off, looking at the knife. The thought of using the knife didn't sit well with me. "I hope that it would not come to you ever having to hurt someone, Luna. But it would make me feel better about your safety if both of these items were with you in case I were to fail you. You don't need to know how to fight with a knife, and this one should be suitably sized for you," he expounded. I bit my lip as I looked between Felix and the knife. "Okay," I agreed. "Does Liam know about this, though?" Felix shook his head. "I can speak with him about it." "Where exactly do I put this knife?" I asked him. Chapter 56. Missy. I felt whole again. As soon as I heard Maddox over the link, my heart soared. I ran so fast that I got in front of Liam and Dr. Ron, reaching the cottage and Maddox first. I didn't let go of Maddox until he had been walking through the woods with me in his arms for quite a while. He finally persuaded me to get down. We shifted and ran all the way home. When we got back, we headed straight to the shower. Maddox's smell was mixed with vampire and blood. Then we fell into bed. Maddox had zero complaints when I insisted on laying on his chest. Just like he promised, all we did was sleep. Being so close to him again, feeling him, smelling him put my whole body at peace. We slept well into the evening. I could have stayed like that forever, but Maddox woke me up making me laugh as my eyes fluttered open. "Good morning," he laughed. It's evening I think," I said. "I know. I am starving, but someone had such a grip on me, I couldn't get out of bed," he joked. "You aren't leaving me," I fake pouted. "I would never dare," he mused. "Let's go downstairs and find something to eat together." He smiled down at me, his face relaxed. I missed his smile and easygoing attitude. I didn't realize how I felt so much more sure of myself when he was around because he was so sure of himself all the time. I questioned my decisions more without Maddox by my side. I rolled my eyes but smiled. Fine, I agreed. We climbed out of bed, and Maddox grabbed hold of my hand as we headed downstairs. When we got to the kitchen, Maddox said, "Sit," pointing to the table. When I gave him a questioning look, he explained, "I have been eating takeout for too long. I want to cook you something." He went to the fridge and started poking his head around. I wasn't too sure what was in there because I had given Sol all the food money to shop. I hopped up on the counter and watched as Maddox went to work. If this was what life with Maddox would bring, I was ready to jump in entirely. I couldn't imagine him any other way as he moved around the kitchen shirtless, making us dinner. It was perfect, he was perfect. He was strong and driven. He could fight vampires and then come home and cook dinner. He caught me staring and laughed. "What?" he asked. "I'm just happy you're back. This is where you belong," I told him. He came over to me, stopping in between my legs and resting his warm hands on my thighs. "I belong with you," he said cheekily. "I can be anywhere as long as I have you with me." "Then don't let my dad talk you into running off on spy missions for the pack anymore," I scolded. He just chuckled. "I think I have fulfilled my quota for a while, but I do still intend on being a warrior," he said. I scowled. "Does that mean you plan to go to training tomorrow?" He shook his head. "Maybe next week." "School, yes, but training can wait. I want to spend time with you. We have a lot to make up for." He had a mischievous glint in his eye, but I was stuck on the school part. "I don't want to go to school. You just got home," I argued. "And I have already missed so much," he said. "Plus, we have all the same classes, so we will be together all day long." "So? You just got back." "It's not that important," I whined. "It is, though," he said, cupping my face. "We promised your mom we would graduate. I have missed a whole bunch so far, and I bet you haven't been a stellar student. We will have all day together at school, then come home and have all night together. You can help me catch up." "I dislike your use of factual logic," I told him. "What if we did something special this weekend?" he asked. I tilted my head, curious to hear more. "I need to talk to your dad about logistics, but I want to take you on a date." "Oh?" I asked. "Where?" "I have some ideas, but I am not telling you anything." "And we aren't going if you refuse to go to school," he joked. "Fine," I agreed. "But I warned you if you realize it would have been a much better idea to stay in bed with me all day tomorrow." "You can rub it in my face," he said, pecking my lips. I grabbed the back of his head and pulled him back in for a deeper kiss. When we got to school, everyone was waiting by my locker. There were lots of hugs and welcomes for Maddox, and Emmett pouted about not being able to flirt with me now that he was back. I couldn't wait for him to find his mate and be obsessed with a singular girl. Sol was betting that it was Julie, but I thought it would be Allie. On the way to our first class, some jock passed us, ramming his shoulder into me and calling me a name. I ignored them as usual. Even if the bullying was fresh, I couldn't care with Maddox finally back. Maddox had not been so quick to excuse it, though. He snapped his head to the guys and growled. I had to tell him to ignore it and explain that it was entirely normal. He didn't like my placating, bringing on a grumpy mood for much of our first and second periods. When someone threw a crumpled up paper at the back of our heads during our third period, I had to grab Maddox's arm to keep him from jumping up to say something. He was gritting his teeth for the rest of the class. "Maddox," I linked him. "Yeah," he answered. "You have to calm down," I told him. "You can't be attacking everyone who makes some dumb comment or calls me some stupid name. We will spend our whole day on that and not on actual school." He retorted. "Who are they to judge you?" "I don't really care," I told him. "It doesn't bug me anymore. I have you and all of our friends. They are better friends than all the people in this pack I have grown up with anyway. Who cares how you all came to be here? Plus, I have my mate, and I am happy." "I don't like it," he said. I knew he was mad and feeling territorial, but it would just make the rest of the year harder if he lashed out at them. If we ignored it, it would stay relatively minimal because they wouldn't be satisfied with our reaction. "Can you please try and ignore it?" I begged. "For me." He slumped in his chair next to me. He looked at me with a hint of defeat on his face. "Fine," he said, nodding. "As long as it doesn't get out of hand." "All right," I agreed, smiling at him. I knew school would already be an adjustment for him. Sol explained how small their school was in their old pack. There were only 20 kids in their grade total. Plus, he had just been gone on a vampire finding mission. Finally, it was time for lunch, and I was relieved to get to our friends. Maddox. As much as I was trying to jump back into everyday life, fulfill my promise to Luna, and keep Missy happy, nothing about being back in this place felt normal now. Coming back to school like I was a regular kid with regular dreams after what I'd just gone through seemed fake. The transition from a wartime mission to get intelligence that ended in me crushing the skull of a sire in my hands to mundane life was eerie. Every sound was a threat. Every whisper was someone the vampires turned against us. I couldn't break the feeling that I still wasn't safe. Now Missy was with me, and she wasn't safe. To make matters worse, apparently, Missy was being bullied, and she thought it was a normal part of life that needed to be ignored. A growl slipped out when one dared to touch her this morning. "Kill," Tom demanded within me, ready to jump into battle once more. "No one touches mate." "No," I told him. "We're at school." I managed to push him back into his recess somewhere in my mind, but this continued throughout the day. Someone threw balled paper at her in class, and it took every ounce of self-control I had to stay in my seat. If Missy hadn't been there asking me to let it go and pulling at my arm to calm me down, I don't know what would have happened. Her scent and her presence were all that was getting me through the day. She was right, we probably should have stayed home in bed, but I couldn't tell her that now. All of the stress of keeping myself together distracted me, but I was relieved when the lunch bell rang. I felt my stomach growl and realized I was hungry. Finally, we could go to our table away from these morons and eat in relative peace. The noise of the lunchroom made me uneasy again, something I hadn't expected. After a prolonged period of trying to keep ourselves hidden from notice, I felt like everyone was staring when I walked in. "It's all in my head," I tried to tell myself. I felt Missy squeeze my hand, and I looked down to see her smiling at me sweetly. My heart jumped, and I felt the pleasant warmth of our bond where her hand met mine. I nuzzled my nose into the top of her head and basked in her calming scent, my body relaxing. I used my free hand to gently push her chin up to see her face. I'd missed it every moment I'd been away, seeing it in my dreams and holding on to her like a lifeline. I'm glad I didn't leave her widowed so young. She didn't deserve it. I placed a soft kiss on her lips and felt the sparks simmering pleasantly upon them before I pulled away. "I love you," I told her quietly. "And I love you. Get a room." Emmett teased, clearly annoyed by his inability to find love of his own. His desperation annoyed me. We got our food without further problems, and we were soon seated at our table, where small talk among our group ensued. Missy seemed distracted with wanting to be as close to me as possible, but I just tried to enjoy the food and my proximity to her without thinking about anything else. Unfortunately, I wasn't succeeding. It felt off that no one had said anything to Missy since we'd arrived, and nothing happened in line. I'd been expecting to have to hold Tom back at some point until we were seated. I was also heavily aware that a large part of the group bothering Missy was in the corner with barely concealed laughs and whispers in our direction. Something was wrong. That's when I felt him walk up behind us. One of the jocks walked over. "Just wanted to give you a message from the rest of the class," he said, looking down at Missy. "Yeah, what's that?" Sol asked, her expression clearly unenthused by this interruption. "We don't need you charity cases here, and you can take this one back with you," he said, gesturing to Missy. "Go be with your own kind." A growl escaped my lips as I began to lose the battle with my self-control. How dare he talk to my mate and my friends this way? "I think we are all ready, thank you," Sol told him dismissively. "Did you forget that she's also the Alpha's daughter? She's not anyone's daughter. Once they have one of their own, they'll put her back in the trash where she belongs. Just like her junkie mom." I could feel the searing pain that caused Missy through our bond, and it cut me deeply. "Leave. Now," I managed to get out. "I'm done. Here, I thought you might want some extra charity, though. I don't need this anymore." With that, he lifted his chocolate milk over Missy's head and dumped the contents all over her. She gasped in surprise as the full container emptied into her hair, washing over her surprised face. He walked away, a smug look on his face that I could barely see through the rage-filled haze covering my vision. I felt Missy's despondence, and I knew somehow this was my fault. They only thought this was acceptable because I left her here alone. I abandoned her, just like I'd abandoned Langston. I don't remember how I got there, all I knew was I was on my feet in front of him. My chair was somewhere in oblivion where I'd sent it, and now my hands were closed around his shirt, sending him into the air above. His feet helplessly kicked as they tried to find purchase on the ground they could no longer reach. I growled and plunged him into the table at his feet. He crashed through the surface, splitting it into a myriad of pieces as I came down on top of him. My knee slid across his waist to allow my shin to rest there, pinning him to the ground. My other foot was on the floor, keeping me upright and over him as I rained down blow after blow. Blood sprayed from his mouth, then his nose broke, and I continued. "Not my mate," I roared, each word accentuated by the wet thud of my fists connecting with this bully's broken face. "Maddox!" Missy screamed from behind me, the first thing I'd heard since this began. I stopped, actually looking at the person under me for the first time. He'd passed out with his arms splayed by his side in the mess of the table shards around us. The lunchroom was dead silent with everyone on their feet and looking at us, at me, in horror. Missy's face was terrified as she looked down at me, her hand now on my shoulder, trying to pull me away with her. I let her help me to my feet. Looking around, I could see the group of this loser's friends staring at me, their mouths agape in expressions of disbelief. I bared my teeth as I looked into their transfixed vapid expressions of terror and managed to get out, "Leave her alone." Chapter 57. Liam. Azalea and Lily put a lot of effort into the baby shower for Lacey. I was surprised at how quickly they pulled it all together. With this being for Lacey and Felix, I decided to attend to keep an eye on Azalea so Felix could enjoy himself. Although, it was hard to determine if he was or not by his expression. He gave an only clue every time his eyes went to Lacey, he would almost grin. The whole backyard of the pack house was a pumpkin patch. Orange, blue, and silver pumpkins with greenery covered everything. A banner with our little pumpkin was strung up over the present table. They even painted Lacey's belly to look like a pumpkin. I laughed when Felix blatantly refused the daddy gourd shirt they tried to force him to wear. Since Abigail was in attendance, Austin followed Azalea around on guard duty for the afternoon. It was comical to watch him get exasperated with her running around the party, jumping from one task to another. Since snapping on her, Azalea had been docile. She also started wearing the watch she got from Greyback's box. I still wasn't sure exactly what it did, but if it anyway could be used to protect her, I was all for it. We had barely spoken since her apology. That was in part due to Maddox and Langston returning. I felt slightly remorseful as I watched her host the baby shower. After calming down, I recognized she never saw the danger in her actions. That was the problem with it all, she couldn't always see the risk she took. Lily came over to stand with me at the back of the party. "What's the look for?" she asked, leaning against the wall of the pack house. "Not into baby pumpkins." I chuckled softly. "You guys did a fantastic job. Lacey looks happy, and I am sure Felix appreciates you being so welcoming," I told her. "Lee and I are good at these things." "Plenty of practice," she laughed. "But I also know that look, Liam." "What's going on?" I sighed. "Just keeping an eye on her," I said. "You're still not over what happened," she observed, looking back at the party. "And before you say anything, yes," she told me. "I agree, she should not have done it. I do not condone you throwing her over your shoulder and locking her in your room like a prisoner, however." I could feel Lily's sideways stare at me. "That probably wasn't one of my best moments," I admitted. I saw red. I couldn't put into words the unmatched rage that had taken over when I got in that room. "I get it," Lily said. "You've always been this way with her. You guys should talk, though. She feels lost with you being distant. We need you both at 100% if we stand a chance at winning this thing." I turned my head to look at Lily for a moment. She was watching the party with a somber expression. "I feel like maybe you should be taking your own advice. How is everything between you and Damien?" She let out a hollow laugh. "Are you asking as his friend or his alpha?" "I'm your friend before your alpha. Lily, he can't find a way to cope with this if you aren't there. He needs you," I told her. "I'm just not so sure of that since he woke up," she sighed. "He isn't going to ask for your help. Even with you, he is terrified of being weak. This is new to him and you. Go out to the woods with him tonight and shift. Help Cage. This time, he needs you to be the strong one and show him it's okay," I told her. She pursed her lips but didn't say anything else. I figured Damien wasn't relying on his mate to help him work through this problem with his wolf. Damien was a provider, he liked to be relied on, not to rely on others. Lily used to know how to help him, always knowing precisely where she was needed or helpful. It seemed since he got hurt, she had lost her confidence. After a few more minutes of watching the party, it looked like the games were about to start. Lily pushed off the wall to help Azalea. "He likes to go out right after the kids go to bed. I can handle Delilah and Lucas tonight," I said to her. She paused for a moment before she continued on her way to rejoin the party. After reading bedtime stories to the kids and getting Azalea settled in her crib for the night, I entered our bedroom to find Azalea curled up on the bed with a book. She looked up at me for just a moment with shy eyes before they went back to her story. I studied her for a moment on the bed. She had a light sweater wrapped around her shoulders and her hair was long and loose over one of them. I could see my mark clearly from here. I padded over and sat on the edge of the bed. She sat so close to the edge on her side, it felt like there was a chasm between us. Normally, she would get comfortable right in the center and wait for me to join her. I crawled over to her and pulled the book from her hands. She gave me a wide-eyed look as I set it on her nightstand. I leaned over her, cupping her jaw so my thumb could lightly trace over her cheek. "I'm sorry for how I reacted," I apologized. She swallowed, silently looking at me with nervousness in her eyes. I wanted her to be more cautious and stop blindly running toward danger, but I didn't want to take away the things that make her my Azalea. "I shouldn't have been so rough with you." "It's okay," she said in a quiet voice. "I owe you an apology, too. I disrespected you by meeting with Warwick behind your back. I also disrespected Robert, which was not fair to either of you. I am so sorry." We were both quiet for a drawn minute. I simply took in the beautiful creature the moon goddess blessed me with. "I know you don't mean to hurt me with your protective nature," she broke the silence. "I promise I will stop making it so hard for you. I won't go behind your back like that ever again. I love you more than anything," I told her. Relief settled in my chest at her understanding. "I love you, too," she said. "I will, too," I promised back. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me closer. "Liam, I don't want anyone else to get hurt," she whispered. "I know," I told her. "It's almost over. I will end this soon." I nibbled and sucked my way down the supple skin of her neck right to my mark. I planted open-mouth kisses there as her grip on me tightened. "Lily." I crept through the trees, moving towards Damien's scent. I didn't know how he was going to react. He refused to talk to me about the problems he had with his wolf. I finally caught his scent in one particular direction and made my way to it. He was standing in a small break within the trees wearing just shorts. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and I could tell he was frustrated with Liam's apparent lateness. When I stepped into his line of sight, he turned to me, shock registering on his features. "Lily, what are you doing out here?" he asked. I stopped in front of him as he looked down at me. "You don't need to do this alone, Di," I told him. His face flinched momentarily. "You don't need to be here for this," he said quietly. I reached out and grabbed his hand. I turned it over in mine, feeling his calluses and the warmth he had. "Di, I'm your mate. You aren't strong without me, and I'm not without you. The best thing for Cage is me. I'll keep him grounded. You can rely on me," I said quietly, my eyes still on his hand in mine. His fingers curled, making a loose fist. "If he hurt you," he mumbled. "He won't because you wouldn't. We can do this together, okay?" I said, peering up at him. He wouldn't meet my gaze, and I could feel his shame through our bond. I stepped back and slowly stripped off my clothes. I let myself shift, bringing my wolf into control. She was worried about Cage dismissing her, but I was confident it wouldn't happen. Damien stood there for a moment, frozen at my wolf's appearance. "Shift," I urged him. He sighed and slipped his shorts down his powerful thighs. All the obsessive training brought back his remarkable tone and definition lost during his coma. He crouched over on the ground, planting himself on all fours. His shift was slow, and I could feel his pain, but it was better than with Dr. Ron here to observe. Maybe this was becoming easier. Cage looked around wildly when the shift was completed, then his gaze finally fell on me. He sat back on his haunches, appraising me. I turned away from him and took a few steps before looking back at him. Cage's head was tilted with curiosity. My wolf took off at a run, deeper into the trees. It only took a matter of seconds before I could hear Cage bounding through the trees to catch up to me. "Cage, it's time to let Damien come back," I told him. We had run and played for a few hours, much later than Damien was usually out. "Come back tomorrow," he bargained. I licked his face in agreement. I wandered back over to the place I dropped my clothes and shifted back. I gave Cage and Damien a moment of privacy to shift back as well as I pulled my clothes back on. As I put my shirt in place, I felt large, warm arms wrap around me. I yelped but then immediately giggled, and Damien lifted me up. "What are you doing?" I squealed as Damien started to trudge through the forest, unceremoniously carrying me by my midsection. "Showing my mate the appreciation she deserves," he growled. His tone was playful and lusty. The sound went straight to my core. As he broke through the treeline, I tried to get out of his hold, but Damien just laughed. "You aren't getting away, Lillipad," he mused as he headed for the back door of the pack house. I continued to struggle with him playfully. He started tickling my sides, making me squirm against him more. I realized that at this moment, I could make him feel dominant and strong again by letting him have control. "Shhhh," he nipped at my ear, and he carried me into the pack house. "You'll wake everyone up. Stop tickling me," I gasped. Damien's lips planted themselves right below my ear, sending a pleasurable trill through me. He hummed, causing goosebumps to rise on my skin. "Are you going to put me down?" I whispered as he climbed the stairs. "Do you want me to?" he whispered huskily. I didn't, I really didn't. I shook my head, and I could feel him smile against my skin as he got closer and closer to our room. Without watching where he was going, he started kissing and nipping at my neck and shoulder. I stopped fighting him and melted into the feeling. He shifted his grip on me to one arm and threw open our bedroom door. Kicking it closed behind him, he marched to our bed, climbing atop it before dropping me. I landed on my front, but he quickly flipped me over. I was panting slightly from the excitement of his mood. He looked down at me, his eyes full of longing. His calloused hand groped and caressed my skin, the feeling wildly familiar and wanted. Small, needy moans erupted from me as Damien explored what would always be his. "I think it's time for me to show you just how strong you make me," he whispered as he pulled away from our kiss. Every nerve in my body lit up as he did just that. Chapter 58. Missy. Maddox sat on the couch, leaning his elbows on his knees. I paced the floor opposite him, chewing on my nail. Faint bruises painted his knuckles now that he washed the blood from his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. I didn't respond. I had been silent since we got back, racking my brain trying to puzzle together how that words elicited that explosive response. I paused for a moment, looking at Maddox still staring at the ground, then resumed my pacing. What brought this on? Yeah, I could admit Jeremy's words stung some. We used to be friends when we were back in elementary school, but he distanced himself after my mom died like everyone else. He knew my mom wasn't a junkie, that was just the favored rumor that was spread after her death. Getting milk spilled over my head was unpleasant, but it didn't warrant Maddox almost beating him to death. There was so much rage coming from Maddox when he attacked Jeremy, I was paralyzed for a minute. Can you please stop pacing? Maddox asked. I looked at him to find him finally looking up at me. I just don't get why. I can't make sense of it, I told him. I grabbed at my hair. You rearranged someone's face when I could have gone to the bathroom and washed out the milk. I'm sorry, he said. I snapped. Maddox, it was more than that. You were completely out of control. He had to know just how worried I was. I could even feel the stress seeping out of me. You were right, we shouldn't have gone back yet, okay, he said defeatedly. I want to know why you almost killed him over an insult, Maddox, I demanded. You were hurt. What he said hurt my mate, and I reacted, he reasoned. That wasn't a reaction. That was annihilation, I said, shaking my head. It was a total overreaction. Maddox, what if you get expelled over this? We go to a school full of werewolves, some of which are at mating age. There is no way I am going to get expelled for breaking his nose, he said. Do not deflect. I shouted. He looked hurt by my outburst, so I tried to calm myself down. Maddox rubbed his shoulders, looking sad. I snapped because it's my fault, he muttered. I looked at him bewildered. I have been the center point of teasing and taunts for years, but it's your fault? You are going to have to connect the dots for me, I told him. He sighed. I left you here. I left to go search out Warwick. We should have been at school all this time together. If we had walked through the doors on the first day together, I could have prevented all of this. From day one, I would have made it known that they weren't to go near you. Instead, I left you just like I left Langston. You both got hurt because I ran when it was more important for me to stay. Maddox dropped his head into his hands. He wasn't crying, but I could feel his desolation. All I could do for a moment was stand there blinking as I tried to process what he had just admitted fully. I went over to the couch, lowering myself next to him. I laid my head on his shoulder. What happened to Langston? I asked softly. He shook his head. Maddox, please tell me. Things didn't go as planned, he said. His voice was so quiet I had to listen closely. We found Warwick's hiding place but ran into another sire there before we could get out. Langston made an opening, and I ran. I knew I shouldn't have left him. His fists curled over his eyes and his shoulders tensed. I reached up and rubbed his back in small circles. Big Rave crushed his spine, Missy. I left, and Langston almost died. I just barely got back to him, but it was already too late. He might never walk again. I had no idea, I said. My heart sunk. My mate felt guilty for leaving Langston to fight a sire on his own, and it was worsening his guilt for leaving me alone. I was so selfish about him going, I made it all about how much I needed him. Maddox needed me too, and I wasn't there for him like he needed. I didn't tell you, so you had no way to know. I was so relieved to have you in my arms again finally. I didn't want to ruin that with anything that had happened while we were gone, he admitted. I continued to rub his back, and his shoulders slowly relaxed. Finally, I had to ask. Maddox, did you tell my dad about any of this? No, he said, sitting up. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face looked drained. I was going to call him after school today to check on Langston. I just wanted to go back to normal with you. I nodded. I think we should go talk to him, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. He raised his hand and ran it over my tangled, milk-soaked hair. His eyes followed his fingers. Can it wait? I just want to be with you right now, he said. I bit my lip and nodded. First thing in the morning, I offered. He nodded. Let's go wash your hair. I don't like being reminded of what happened, he said, his eyes still avoiding mine. I reached up and cupped his cheek lightly. It looked like we had some healing to do. Lemon. Maddox and Missy quickly disappeared after Liam and his uncle arrived to help Mr. Langston. I waited in my office, and soon after, Axel joined me. He told me he needed to go and would check on me the first chance he got. I didn't ask him to explain, but I could surmise it had to do with however Mr. Langston and Maddox ended up in their conditions. The following morning, I woke up thinking about Axel. Without any hesitation, he had taken control of the situation. He even calmed me down and refocused me. I had never seen that much blood in my life. I panicked until he stepped in. I decided not to go to work, instead opting to stay home. All day, I moved about the house cleaning or doing laundry with Axel right there in the back of my head. He was so capable, acting so rationally and quickly in every emergency. I was also slightly worried that I had not heard from him since the previous afternoon. I knew he said he would check in with me when he was free, but it had been a long time. I had no right to demand anything of his time or ask that he tell me where he was, but it still had me nervous. I was relieved when a knock on my door around lunchtime brought me to find him on my porch. He looked a bit haggard but was also freshly showered. "Hey," he said with a tired smile. "Glad to see you're all right," I said, stepping back so he could come in. He raised an eyebrow at me as he passed. "Was someone worried about me?" he smirked. "Only because I am so used to you always being around. I never go more than 8 hours without seeing you," I pointed out, trying to hide my blush. He laughed. "Fair enough. Sorry, things took longer than expected, and I really needed a shower," he explained. "You don't owe me anything," I said, walking to the kitchen. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. He went to the kitchen table and took a seat. "Have you eaten today?" I asked, changing the subject. "No," he said, sounding a bit amused. "We could have lunch, then," I said, grabbing my phone. I texted the chef at the inn to get something sent over for us. I needed to go grocery shopping, so the options in my cupboards were limited. "What do you want to do while we wait?" Axel shrugged. "I got all the time in the world," he grinned. I looked away from him, not wanting to get lost. "Movie?" I squeaked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "We could watch a movie or something. It should only be 20 minutes or so until lunch is here." "Sounds good to me," he said. I led the way into the living room, grabbing the remote from the table and tossing it to him. "Guests choose," I said, taking a seat on one side of the couch. Axel sank into the other end, leaving a cushion in between us. He flipped through the channels until he settled on some crime thriller I hadn't seen before. We sat comfortably for a few minutes, watching the movie he chose until he interrupted the silence. "So, how do you feel after yesterday? I know it was sort of a lot to deal with." "I'm okay," I said. It was true. As soon as I knew he was okay, yesterday's events didn't seem to matter much. "I was a little worried that you didn't go to the inn today because of it," he admitted. I ducked my head. "I thought it was a good day to take off," I said. I looked sideways at him as he nodded. His eyes were watching me, and I could tell he was trying to figure something out. The doorbell chimed, and I knew it was our lunch. I hopped up to collect it, bringing the bag to the coffee table. "We can eat in here," I said. "No sense in stopping the movie." Axel scooted over on the couch to have better access to the table. I set a box down in front of him, and he opened it greedily. I sat down to dig into mine as he started to inhale his. "Are you even tasting that?" I laughed. He paused mid-bite, letting out a small laugh. "Sorry," he said. "I guess I was more hungry than I thought." "Here," I said, pushing some of mine to his box. "I never finish it all anyway." He smiled brightly. "Thanks." We went back to eating, and I didn't realize that the distance between us had almost completely closed. When Axel finished, he sat back, draping his arm on the back of the couch behind me. When I was finished, I sat back too, pretending not to notice his arm almost over my shoulder. It felt rude to scoot away from him back my original spot at the armrest, so I sat there watching the movie while internally panicking. The movie was close to ending, and I was planning my escape. We hadn't moved at all for the rest of the film. I was so afraid to give him the wrong impression either way because I had no clue what impression I wanted to give him. "Lemon," he whispered, breaking me from my thoughts. "Yeah?" I turned to him. "Do you think you will ever act on those feelings?" he asked. I turned away from him, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I should have known he wouldn't forget my words. He brought his hand up to my face, turning me back to him. His fingers were warm and rough against my cheek. "I just need to know that I am not wasting my time chasing you when you don't want me to," he said softly. "Axel," I trailed off. How did I explain to him the constant internal feud I was putting myself through? I remembered my list. There are so many what-ifs that I just can't ignore. His eyes searched mine for a minute. "What if I could love all your what-ifs away?" I let out a small gasp. Axel just continued, "I know you have reservations and worries. I just want the chance to show you that we could have something more than any of that. I promise they won't matter. I care about you too much to let them matter, Lemon. All I am asking for is a chance. Take a leap with me. Maybe the real what if is what if we could fall in love." That was the single most romantic thing I had ever heard, and it was directed at me. In a matter of seconds, Axel swept my worries under the rug. They didn't matter anymore as I looked up into his shining eyes. I could give him a chance, I wanted to give him a chance. Chapter 59. Maddox. The next couple of days passed by too quickly. I went and spoke with Alpha early the next morning. He filled me in on what happened with Langston, telling me that his injury wasn't going to heal all the way, but he has accepted it. He told me Dr. Ron was releasing him later that day to go home to Serenity Waters with Emma so he could rest and recuperate as much as possible. I couldn't bring myself to go visit him after all the damage I had caused. Missy and I stayed home from school for the next couple of days, taking time for ourselves. Sol brought our missing work by, my pile much larger than Missy's. We started to work through it, but more time was spent just being with each other than anything else. By Friday night, I was feeling much better. There was still lingering guilt inside me for abandoning Langston and Missy in their own ways, but I was starting to figure out how to live with it. I knew we needed to escape all the heaviness surrounding the pack and our normal lives. First, I called Luna to see if she could help me with my plan. After getting everything worked out with her, I texted all our friends to meet us first thing in the morning. I made all the arrangements necessary, then got permission from Alpha to forego a chaperone for the day. He took far more convincing than Luna did, but agreed to my plan in the end. Then I got to tell Missy. "I have a surprise for you tomorrow," I whispered into her ear as we cuddled in bed. Her back was flush to my front as we laid on our sides watching TV. "Surprise?" she asked, turning her head back slightly. Yeah, I said. We're going somewhere tomorrow. Where? She questioned. It wouldn't be a surprise if I told you, I said. She pouted and turned her head back. I nuzzled her neck behind her ear, raising little goosebumps along her shoulder. She smelled the strongest right here, it was my favorite spot. What do I wear? She asked. Something casual, I answered. But bring a bag with a change of clothes for later. Something nicer. How nice? She asked. I thought, wondering how to tell her without giving it away. Maybe first date with a guy you really like. She giggled at my answer. The morning came, and I'd woken much earlier than when I'd told Missy to set her alarm. I dozed off for a few hours, but once I woke up, I couldn't sleep. I looked down at Missy peacefully sleeping, and it filled me with a little peace of my own. We were mates, and we lived together now. Still, I don't know if the sense of "I can't believe this one is mine" will ever wear off. Looking at her still sent pleasant warmth down my spine and into my belly. I considered brushing her hair from her sun-kissed cheek until she rolled away from facing me onto her back, causing our blanket to spill from near her chin to her waist and drawing my eyes downward. I felt a familiar stirring below. I sighed and chastised myself as I got out of bed, not now. After reluctantly drawing the blanket back over her so she wouldn't get cold, I went and took a cold shower before slipping into comfortable clothes. The sun wasn't up yet, and Missy was still fast asleep. Luckily, she hadn't noticed I was out of bed yet, and she looked content. I pulled my shoes on quietly and slipped out the door without disturbing her. My heart felt lighter, and I knew today was going to be a day we'd remember. I was going to make sure of it. I went to our small corner store down the road, where my grocery order was ready for pickup. Looking through the bags, I saw everything I would need for the morning. I was glad this store offered early pickup because it would have been hard to get this planned otherwise. As I mentally tallied what I needed to do first, the image of Missy watching me cook for her crossed my mind, and I smiled stupidly to myself. On my way home, I stopped by the florist, and I saw exactly what I was looking for. I'd asked the very nice older woman here to leave my order on the bend outside her front door because I needed them before she opened. She'd happily agreed when I explained what I was doing. Now that I was here, I noticed she'd even put the bouquet in a pretty white and gold vase. I ordered white roses because I'd been told they symbolized true love. Researching flowers on my own, I found they also represented young love. I couldn't think of anything more fitting. Humming to myself happily, it wasn't long before I was home. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting it in hues of pink and orange. I slowly opened the front door, trying to keep it from creaking where it usually did at the end. I brought the bags in, setting them on our counter and unloading them. You never notice how loud plastic grocery bags are until you need to be quiet with them. Fishing through the bags, I pulled out the most important thing for this morning. It was a waffle maker. Soon, I was whisking together batter as the waffle iron heated up. Dropping butter into it, I coated the metal for the first time and began making waffles as I prepared the raspberries and the blueberries I'd gotten to go with our breakfast. In no time, I had everything ready, including a basket to surprise Missy with later on the nicer part of the date I'd promised her. I padded silently into our room, staged her flowers on the dresser for her to see when she woke up and tried to get back to the kitchen to get our food before she noticed. She purred, stirring from her place on the bed. What is that smell? Stay here, I insisted, running to the kitchen before she could argue. Pulling out the ice cream scoop, I warmed it under a stream of water from the kitchen faucet and dropped 2 scoops on the warm waffles on both our plates before dressing them with chocolate syrup and berries. Scooping the plates onto trays, I grabbed our orange juice before heading back to my awakening mate. When I returned, she was sitting up with her back against the wall and a playful grin on her lips. "You got me flowers." "Well, I get to look at you all the time. I thought it was only fair you got to look at something almost as beautiful," I teased. Her face reddened, and I knew I'd hit the spot I was aiming for. I swooped down and placed her tray in her lap as I watched her eyes widen. Taking advantage of her momentary speechlessness, I placed a quick kiss on her lips. If heaven had a taste, it would be Missy. "Is this ice cream?" she asked incredulously but still grinning as her fingers mindlessly traced where our lips met. "So, I have a plan," I said, not directly answering her question. "What is that?" she asked, looking up into my eyes with hers mostly open now. "We're still young, but we have to act like we're adults. You're the alpha's kid, and you have to deal with all the responsibility it entails, and I'm a warrior. You know what that's done recently?" She reached out as I trailed off, but I shook my head. "No, I'm fine. Just, what I'm saying is, today we're going to act our age. We're going to have fun. We're going to do silly things. And, today, we're going to eat ice cream for breakfast." The enormously happy look on her face was enough to let me know that she was all in with me on this plan. She moaned as the ice cream melted in her mouth along with the warm waffle, and I couldn't blame her when I tasted it myself. It was a close second to the kiss from earlier. "I think I could get used to this," she told me as she scooted closer to sit directly in front of me, both of us cross-legged on the bed with our tray in front of us now. "I like when you cook for me. I'm happy to feed you whenever you'd like, my love," I answered honestly. "So, what else are we doing today?" she asked excitedly. "I'm not telling," I told her with a wink. I decided her frustrated mixture of a growl and a moan just might be my new favorite sound, and I was determined to hear it more in the future. With nervous energy, she finished eating her waffles. "I'm done now," she declared with a smile. "You're going to have to tell me soon." "Not a chance," I insisted, unable to hide the grin spreading on my lips. Her bottom lip pushed out heavily as she crossed her arms and gave me an adorable mock pout with puppy eyes. All it did was make me notice she had chocolate syrup on her lip. Leaning forward, I gestured for her to pause with one finger and brought my mouth over hers. I gently enveloped her bottom lip and licked it clean of the sweet syrup with my tongue. Missy shivered and flushed, and I planted a soft kiss just under her jawline on her neck. The goosebumps raised as if they were waiting for me, and I reveled in them as I rubbed my nose and lips gently across her raised flesh. Missy was going to combust if I didn't stop, so I sat back away from her with a wink. "I think I'm going to get dressed," she announced, jumping to her feet. "Want to help me pick what to wear?" "I can tell you yes or no," I proffered, not wanting her to ruin the surprise by eliciting me to give her too much information on accident. She shrugged and walked over to her dresser and pulled out what looked like 2 outfits. Laying them out in front of me, she just announced, "Pick one." On one side, she had relatively short athletic shorts and a tank top shirt of some kind, and on the other, she had what looked like leggings and a t-shirt. Thinking for a moment, I chose the latter. It would probably be more comfortable if she fell and rubbed her skin where we were going. She nodded and then went to the closet to hold up a pair of flip-flops and a pair of shoes. This time, I chose the former. She wasn't going to need shoes where we were going. Standing up, I decided to deprive myself of watching her get dressed in favor of cleaning up the kitchen before we left. I knew it would stress her out if we left the house a mess, and I wanted today to be nothing but a blissful escape from reality. As I was finishing up the dishes, Her sweet strawberry scent floated towards me as she snaked her arms around my stomach from behind. "Thank you for the flowers and breakfast," her voice said, muffled from her face against my back. "Just the beginning," I told her, turning around and burying my face in her hair and enjoying how delicious she smelled. "You ready?" The drive passed quickly as she looked out the window expectantly and asked me pointed questions, trying to get me to give away where we were going. I just smiled and enjoyed the feeling of her hand in mine as we drew closer. "Soul, we're here whenever you're ready. She's going to love this place." My phone buzzed, and Missy didn't miss me letting go of her hand to check it. Still, our friends had gone ahead of us and were waiting. I silently thanked Luna because she'd helped me with some of the plans for today. She'd made sure Soul had a car to use to bring everyone to the outskirts of the city and surprise Missy. She'd also inadvertently given me a better idea for our date tonight, and I couldn't wait for that either. Finally, we pulled into the driveway of a nondescript building that didn't have much in the way of signage. I walked around and opened the door for Missy, grabbing her by the hand and leading her inside. As we walked in the door, her eyes lit up as she looked around and saw the floor covered in what seemed to be miles of trampolines. "You ready to be a kid today?" I asked as she looked up at me, her smile dazzling with excitement. The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.